What if a single speech could shake the foundations of global diplomacy? What if a leader from one of the world's poorest, war-torn nations could stand before cameras and demand respect, not just for himself, but for an entire continent? That's exactly what happened on August 27th at the African Development Summit in Adosaba. In front of hundreds of journalists and dozens of world leaders, Burkina Faso's young president Ibrahim Traoré issued a challenge unlike anything we've seen in modern politics. This wasn't a threat of war. It wasn't a negotiation tactic. It was something much more powerful. A 48-hour ultimatum to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, an ultimatum that stunned the world. And in this video, you're breaking down exactly what happened, why it matters, and how it could reshape the future of African diplomacy and global power politics. This diplomatic earthquake didn't begin on stage. It began behind closed doors. According to multiple diplomatic leaks, during a private G7 meeting, Israel's prime minister allegedly made remarks that African leaders considered deeply offensive. Reports suggest Netanyahu dismissed African heads of state as political opportunists and naive in their criticism of Israel's Gaza campaign. But it didn't stop there. Sources claim he even used words like crude and theatrical to describe Africa's response, and hinted that Israel might back IMF efforts to tighten debt recovery across African nations. Even more alarming, he reportedly floated the idea of a Western-sponsored alliance under the so-called Great Reconstruction 2030 Pact, a move that African diplomats feared could sideline their interests entirely. When this leak hit the media, outrage swept across Africa. Social networks lit up, and within hours the hashtag #AfricaIsNotYourPorn began trending globally. But as fury built online, President Ibrahim Traoré chose silence. At first, it looked like hesitation, but in hindsight, that silence was deliberate. Because when he finally stepped onto the stage in Adosaba, he came prepared to deliver one of the boldest declarations Africa has ever witnessed. Standing tall, staring straight into the cameras, Traoré declared, "Mr. Netanyahu, you have 48 hours to apologize to Africa, or you will no longer be welcome here. Not in trade, not in diplomacy, not in the future of history." The room froze. Journalists stopped mid-keystroke. Delegates exchanged stunned glances. It wasn't a threat of violence. It wasn't about alliances. It was about one thing only: dignity. And within minutes, clips of his words went viral across the world. From Johannesburg to Lagos, Nairobi to Dakar, people embraced the ultimatum as a turning point. South Africa's foreign minister reposted the video saying, "Finally, someone said it." The future of African diplomacy, fearless and incorruptible. Across universities, markets, and even refugee camps, Traoré's words echoed. Africa will not be your subject. Africa will not be chained to debt. Africa demands respect. For millions, this wasn't about Israel versus Burkina Faso. It was about Africa refusing to be belittled on the global stage. And how did Israel respond? With silence. Netanyahu's office issued only a vague denial of the leaked remarks. No apology, no clarification. But that silence only fueled Africa's anger. Analysts argued it confirmed what many Africans already felt, that their concerns are too often brushed aside by global powers. What happened next was extraordinary. For perhaps the first time in years, Africa appeared united, not just in trade talks or conferences, but in spirit. In Burkina Faso's capital, Ouagadougou, thousands rallied in the streets, waving banners that read, "Respect Africa." Diaspora communities in London, Paris, and even New York staged demonstrations in solidarity. Student unions across Ghana and Nigeria issued joint declarations urging the African Union to back Traoré's ultimatum, and even suggested sanctions against countries that disrespected African sovereignty. It was no longer just one leader's fight. It was a continental movement. But make no mistake, this wasn't just about words. Traoré has already positioned himself as a reformer at home, nationalizing gold mines, building Burkina Faso's first refinery, distributing tractors to farmers. And despite a brutal insurgency that has displaced millions, his popularity has surged. A recent survey showed 66% of Burkinabe citizens now accept military rule under him, up from just 24% a decade ago. Many see him as a modern-day Thomas Sankara, a leader unafraid to defy outside powers. That's why his ultimatum resonated far beyond Burkina Faso's borders. In Washington, analysts debated whether Traoré's words were reckless or revolutionary. On U.S. campuses, African-American students hailed him as a voice of clarity and courage. In Moscow and Beijing, state media celebrated him as proof that the global South was rising against Western dominance. In Europe, leaders responded cautiously, emphasizing dialogue, but clearly uneasy at the shifting balance of influence. And across Africa, one truth became clear. Traoré had forced the world to listen. So did Netanyahu apologize? No. But in a way, that didn't matter, because the real victory wasn't in the response. It was in the act itself. One leader, standing alone, redefined what it means for Africa to speak with one voice. For decades, Africa has been told to wait for respect, to earn a seat at the table. Ibrahim Traoré's ultimatum flipped that narrative. His message was simple. Africa does not beg for our. Africa builds its own table, and those who wish to join must come with respect. This moment may be remembered as the spark of a new era in African diplomacy. Not built on armies, not on economic blackmail, but on something far more enduring, dignity. Because as Traoré himself declared, we do not ask for permission to be free. We rise to claim it. And whether you agree with him or not, one thing is undeniable. The world is watching Africa differently today. So, what do you think? Was this ultimatum a reckless gamble or the beginning of a new chapter in global politics? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more deep dives into the stories shaping our world.